Right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, and thank you for joining Actian and MicroStrategy to learn how you can take advantage of data from diverse sources to gain real insight through a visually rich experience. A couple housekeeping items. This webinar is being recording of which will be sent to you after the webinar in a follow-up email. And please use the Q&A section to post any questions you may have, and we will go over these at the end of the webinar. And now, without further ado, over to you, Emma and Bill.
Great, thanks, Helena, and thanks everybody for joining us. I know this is a weird time. I actually am in the Actian Islandia office for the first time in quite some time. I suspect that many of you are at home joining us today. So thanks for joining us. What Bill and I are going to talk about is modern analytics and how we need to adapt today given the current market uncertainty. So there's uncertainty in the jobs market, the stock market, the farmers market. I mean, just to understand, how we need to adapt very quickly right now because everything's changing and evolving on a daily basis. My name is Emma McGrattan, and I have the pleasure of being Senior Vice President for Engineering at Actian. I've been at Actian for 27 years. I started life in the Ingress engineering team in Dublin, where I was responsible for porting the Ingress database to the OS/2 operating system. So that dates me. But I now run the database engineering for Actian. So delivery of our analytics portfolio is probably the most exciting thing that we're doing at Actian right now. And I'm going to spend some time talking about that today. So over to you, Bill.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. Just to reiterate, what you said, I think that there's really never been a more important time for us to talk about the value of getting access to the right data at the right time in terms of making decisions for our businesses that that can respond to the types of uncertainty that we're seeing right now. I think it's certainly fair to say that we have no shortage of data out there. But the ability to separate, intuition from speculation and fact from fiction, really kind of has never been more important. So it's a pleasure to be here with you, and I'm happy to see some folks joining us today.
Great, thanks, Bill. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Actian, it's probably because the name isn't nearly as old as the technology and the pedigree and the number of decades over which we've supported mission-critical data deployment. So Actian's been in business for over 30 years. We have three core areas that we focus on in the realm of enterprise data. So the first is our hybrid cloud data warehouse, and that's really going to be the focus today. The second is our mission-critical data management solutions. There are thousands of companies around the world that bet their business on our data management technologies every day of the week, and we'll talk about a couple of those use cases. And then we also have a business in enterprise data integration, so the ability to bring in data from various sources. That's not always physically bringing in the data, but bringing in some insights from systems like Salesforce, so that you can make the best decisions possible for your business. And we will talk about that as well. So Actian has over 3,000 customers around the world, and we have 24/7 support operation with multilingual, multi-channel support. Customers, when they engage with our support organization, typically come away from it very satisfied. We've got an over 95% customer satisfaction rating, and when you think about it, the person that's picking up the phone or that's engaging with support has typically exhausted Google to look for their results. So when they call us with a problem, it's a real issue, but they come out of that very happy with the engagement with our support team. We really innovate, and you'll hear more about that as I talk through some of the technologies that we have delivered. And we've got over 50 patents, many of them in the area of data integration and data analytics. And we're in 24 of the Fortune 100 and looking to grow that. 2 years ago, we took a strategic investment from a global company called HCL Technologies. HCL does over $10 billion a year in systems integrations and they're doing a ton of digital transformations and bringing Actian's technologies along with them into many of those engagements. You'll see on the screen here some logos from some of our customers. A couple that are near and dear to my heart. Revenue Commissioners is the equivalent of the IRS for Ireland. A lot of their data operations are based upon our technology, and as the CIO there will attest to, if something goes wrong with the tax payment system on the day at which everybody's supposed to be paying their taxes, he will have to stand in front of the Irish Parliament and explain what went wrong. So we really have to make sure that our technologies can support their business operations 24/7, 365. Another great example of a customer is Lufthansa, and Lufthansa uses us for flight planning. And it's not just the simple stuff like how many vegan meals do I need to get onto this particular flight, but also when the flights are in the air and an event happened. It might be a political event, it might be a weather event, it could be something as simple as a brownout on the east coast of the US, right? All of those planes that are over the Atlantic need to be rerouted, need to be landed in airports that are large enough to accommodate planes of their size, and we need to make sure that they have sufficient fuel to get to those airports. So real mission critical stuff, supported not just for Lufthansa but for their partner airlines. So when I said earlier that we support real mission critical deployments, it really is life or death stuff that we're supporting with our data management, data integration, and data analytics technologies. So the technology that I'd like to talk about today is Actian Avalanche, and this is our hybrid cloud data warehouse. And by hybrid, I mean we have the ability to deploy across clouds, so you can have Azure and AWS data warehouses, but also the ability to deploy this on premises. So we're finding that right now people are risk averse, and they're averse to spending a lot of money, and sometimes the investment of moving data analytics from on-premise to cloud can be risky and can be expensive. So we're finding an interest in our on-premises solutions. We had typically seen an interest in on-premises solution from companies in financial services and in healthcare, where they may be subject to regulatory compliance requirements and where they'd really rather, or their CISO may demand, that they keep those data sets that are subject to large fines were they to violate regulatory compliance requirements on premises. But now we're seeing a lot more interest in it, and I think a lot of that is to do with the uncertainty that Bill and I have spoken about with respect to what's going on right now with this global pandemic, and people just not sure what happens next, so wanting to make the most of the current investments, but also to be able to innovate and to turn things around very quickly as things change. So the 4 points that we'll want to hit upon about this technology. The first is this is designed to deliver on the highest performance of any cloud data warehouse at scale, right? So it's whatever your scale choice is, right? But the larger the data set that we're analyzing, the larger the number of users that we're supporting, and the larger the query complexity is, the better we'll perform relative to the competition. So really designed for mission critical analytics deployments in organizations where they want to provide everybody who's making a business decision with access to all of the data that they require to make the best decision possible. And Bill's going to talk more about insights from data. The platform also includes data integration. So when I mentioned the fact that our portfolio is typically divided in three, and one area of focus for us is data integration technologies, we've actually expanded our cloud data warehouse to include data integration capabilities. People expect as they move to the cloud only to have to pay for what they're using. So there's a few facets to that. So one is that we have the ability to scale the cloud data warehouse to meet your specific needs at a moment in time. So let's say your business is peaky, and let's say at the for end of month processing or end of quarter processing, you want to double the horsepower that's being allocated for your warehouse, and pay for that doubling of horsepower only for the period when you need it, right? So when you've closed out the books for the quarter, you want to go back to what it had been previously, and we provide the ability to do that. The second thing is that if you're not using the warehouse, you can shut it down, or you can, if you forget to shut it down, you can specify a period of inactivity after which we'll automatically shut the service down for you. And so you're only paying for this service when you're using it. And the third area of paying only for what you use relates to the fact that as you want to scale to include more users in the system, we have the ability to manage a lot more users in the environment with a single warehouse. You don't have to keep spinning up additional warehouses as our competitors sometimes require. So those are, paying for what you use is what people expect in the cloud, and certainly we deliver upon that. And then the last is the deployment flexibility, and I kind of touched on this, right? So we support on-premises deployment, and on-premises you can choose to run on Windows, on Linux, or on a Hadoop cluster. All of those are supported. And then on the public clouds, today we have support for Azure and for AWS, and we're currently investigating GCP to deliver later this year. So I mentioned that we really focus on performance, right? So what we've done here is we've taken a benchmark. This is a very typical decision support workload. It's a TPC-H benchmark. And that benchmark was deployed against Avalanche and also against Redshift and Snowflake, because those are the two competitors that we come up against the most. And for a single user, what you'll see is that Avalanche came out at 349 seconds to complete the complete set of queries in the benchmark. For Redshift, that was almost double at the time at 632 seconds. And for Snowflake, it was significantly slower, right? Almost 3,000 seconds for Snowflake to complete that query set. So this was for a single user, those numbers, but while we sometimes see a single user at the start of a proof of concept or proof of value, really people want to provide all of their business decision makers with access to all of the data that they need to make the best and most informed decisions for the business. So we reran this benchmark with 20 concurrent users. And a concurrent user means that these queries are hitting the engine at exactly the same instance in time. So typically, if you've got 20 concurrent users, that might equate to about 400 active users in the system, because it's unlikely that everybody's hitting enter at exactly the same millisecond. But what we saw was that as we conducted the benchmark at 20 concurrent users, for Avalanche, the time here is 1,913 seconds. For Redshift, it's more than double now, right? It's 5,376 seconds. And for Snowflake, it just blew right the way up to over 21,000 seconds. So what you can take from this is that, yes, we'll outperform the competition, but the other thing is that performance advantage that we can deliver upon grows as the number of users that are accessing the system grows. So you wind up with two levers that you can pull here. One is, you could say that raw performance allows me to conduct more business, so this makes sense for me to run at the raw speeds that Avalanche can deliver. Or you could take the alternative approach, is just to say, I would be okay being 5 times faster than I am with Snowflake today. So why don't you, scale back the resources that I'm currently using, deploy those resources for Avalanche, cut my bill quite significantly, but still deliver better performance. So that ability to pull those two levers and to decide where you want to be on that price performance ratio is something that's up to you to decide. A little bit more about the technology inside our cloud data warehouse. So it's an MPP columnar SQL data warehouse. So it's a standard SQL. So all of the real estate that you've built up today in SQL-based assets should just run when deployed against Actian Avalanche. MPP means that we have the ability to not just scale up within a node to maximize the capability that that node could deliver upon, but also to scale out across a cluster. So as you bring more nodes into the environment, you'll see better performance being delivered. And we talked already about the highest performance at scale, and as I say, that performance advantage just grows as the more users come into the system or as the data volumes grow. And we've got the ability to deploy any place. It's a fully managed service, so you just have to load the data into the environment. We'll take care of managing past that, and then you just point your visualization and your ETL and your data integration jobs at it, and we'll keep the lights on and keep it running at optimal performance. It's a shared nothing architecture, and it allows for separation of storage and compute. And this gives you the ability, if you wanted to, as I mentioned earlier, scale your compute resources at the end of month or at the end of quarter. You've got the ability to do that without having to pay for additional storage, or without having to reallocate the storage across the new set of nodes in the domain. So really straightforward to grow and shrink the environment. We have built-in connectivity to SaaS applications as well as on-premise applications. And the cloud economics, we talked about paying only for what you use. We also have a set of migration tools that we've built to help migrate people that are running legacy on-premise data warehouse applications. So if you're running, maybe it's a Teradata appliance, maybe it's filled up more quickly than you anticipated it would, and maybe there's certain workloads that you'd like to migrate from that appliance either to Avalanche on cloud or on premises, we have the ability to scope that migration with you and to work with you to automate that migration process. And the parts of that that can't be automated, we have the staff available to us to deliver upon those pieces that couldn't be automated. We also are delivering right now, and this is probably the most interesting project that we have going on in the core engine team right now, is our federated query capability. So I'm going to explain this using a very simple example. So here we have MicroStrategy users in EMEA who are accessing a on-premises database where they're accessing only a European-based data set. So this may be sensitive information, or maybe just be that the business is siloed and that the European operations are running autonomously, and that they've got their own data set in their own data center housed in Europe. Now, all the way to the right of the slide, we've got our North American set of MicroStrategy users. And these users have decided to deploy our Avalanche Cloud Data Warehouse on Microsoft Azure. And so they've chosen a cloud deployment. And again, for the purposes of this example, we're assuming that this is siloed, that it's only North American users that are accessing the North American data set. Now come along the corporate business analyst, and the corporate analyst needs to have a view of the entire business. So what the corporate business analyst does with the aid of our federated query engine is to build a virtual data warehouse, and this virtual data warehouse is comprised, as you can see inside our orange dotted line here, of that EMEA-based data set that's on premises, as well as the North American data set. So now when the corporate business analyst issues renders a dashboard or issues a query from MicroStrategy, that query comes into our federated query engine. The query then gets analyzed, and we identify which component parts of the queries need to be executed where. We push the query fragments down into each of the Avalanche instances so that they can execute on their part of the query, and they'll provide full parallelization in the execution of that query fragment so that it returns the results as quickly as possible. So each of the databases that are participating in solving this query, and there could be multiples, there's two here just for simplicity, pass their result part set back up to the federated query engine. It then pulls all of those result parts together and passes the result set back to the corporate business analyst. So we're able here to provide a global view of the business. We haven't had to move any of the data around. This federated query engine has the knowledge of where the data resides, so it knows which parts of the query to execute where. We also strive to minimize the amount of data movement that's required here. One thing that kills query performance when you're dealing with parallel execution of queries is data movement, so we try to minimize that by being really clever in the generation of query execution plans, so that they're executed efficiently on each of the nodes. So this is a very fun project that we're having. Another fun project that we've completed on already was this separation of storage and compute. So just to explain to you really what that means. So for the example that we're using here, I'm assuming that we're on Microsoft Azure, and we have our Avalanche data in the Azure data lake. So it's using Azure ADLS Gen 2 for storage. Now I have a 4-node cluster that's spun up to meet my mid-quarter business needs, and in that cluster, so we have our 4 nodes. Essentially what we do is we partition the data that's in the data lake, and we say, okay, node 1, you're going to be responsible for the first partition, node 2 is responsible for the second, node 3 the third, and node 4 the fourth, and it goes around in a round-robin pattern here, allocating responsibility for those partitions. So now that is just a logical assignment of responsibility for the partitions. The data lives in the data lake. The data doesn't move. It's just that these queries are going to be run against partitions of the data to parallelize it, and these are the nodes that are going to be responsible for those individual partitions. Now let's assume we're coming up on quarter end and we want to double the compute power. So we have those 4 nodes that we previously had allocated, and now we add another 4 nodes into the environment. Now we reallocate that logical responsibility for the partitions, and now instead of dicing it out in 4s, now we're going to piece this up over the 8 nodes. You want everybody to have an equal slice of the work to do, so we want to balance the number of partitions across all available nodes. And it's as simple as that. So now, again, the data hasn't moved. I've doubled the horsepower. If I'm running the same query that I was previously, I would expect that it's going to complete in half the time. Or if I wanted to double the amount of work that we're doing, obviously I can meet the SLAs that I had in place previously with this. So this ability to scale the environment to meet business needs, really important, and an expectation when you're deploying a cloud data warehouse service. I mentioned earlier that we have our data integration capabilities that are an extension of the Avalanche Cloud Data Warehouse, and this we call our real-time connected data warehouse. And because what we want to be able to do is use MicroStrategy to provide real-time insights, right? So we've highlighted them in red today. We do work with other tools, but MicroStrategy is the favorite partner of the day today. If we look to the left-hand side of the chart, right? So we have the ability to, from Actian Avalanche Connect, to reach out to data that's within data lakes. So maybe you have a Parquet file that's sitting on S3, and we have the ability to reach into that Parquet file to take the portions of the Parquet file that you're interested in bringing into the data lake, or that get the results of a query that you're issuing against it, and bring that into the cloud data warehouse. Similarly, with the SaaS applications like Salesforce, NetSuite, ServiceNow, and so on, we have that direct connectivity into those applications so that you can bring data into the warehouse or get an answer and take that little nugget of information back into the environment. Similarly with SAP and PeopleSoft, Microsoft Dynamics, and so on, all supported. We recognize that on-premise applications are not going away anytime soon, so providing support for those on-premise applications is important. Also providing a REST API so that you can build out connectors for your own custom applications is part of this. We're working right now on a streaming framework, including Kafka, and that's going to be delivered shortly. And then our CDC solution is through our partner HVR to deliver on change data capture. So if you were doing something like maybe you're running your SAP system on top of an Oracle database and you want to capture the the changes as they're happening within that database and feed them into the data warehouse, we provide the ability to do that through our replication partner. So as well as the set of tools that the business analysts will typically use, we also have data ecosystem tools like Jupyter Notebooks and KNIME, and support for Spark SQL, and then standard interfaces like JDBC, ODBC, and Python. So I think it's probably best to demonstrate this through the use of an example. So bear with me just one second as I bring over this. So now, when we come into Actian Avalanche, I created a demonstration environment earlier, and let's just take a look at this. So this is our MicroStrategy demo cluster, and when I come into this cluster, what I can see is that I've set this up as an 8 AU cluster. Now, an AU is an Avalanche unit, and it's just a measure of the horsepower of the cluster that we're running. And now, let's say, it's coming very close to the end of quarter. Let's say I want to grow this cluster to a 16 AU cluster. I have the ability to do that quite simply here by just moving this slider. Because this is my development account, they've limited me to just a 16 AU environment because I get spendy, but in your environment, you could scale this all the way up to 128 AUs. So let me show you how simple it is to create a warehouse. So I come in here to create a warehouse. I'm going to give it a name. Demagods. I'm going to choose a platform. So my MicroStrategy warehouse is running on Azure, so I'm going to create this one on AWS. I then choose a region. So you can probably tell from the accent, I'm from Ireland, so I'm going to choose Ireland as our data center of choice today. Now I'm choosing the horsepower for my environment, right? So we have development and test environments, which are small. These are 2 and 4 AUs, and then we've got the production environments. I'm just going to choose a 2 AU one for simplicity. Every warehouse that we have within the environment is a single tenant environment, and as well as that being one way of securing your data, we also use a set of authorized IP addresses. So here I'm going to add my IP address as a whitelist IP address. So only those addresses that are authorized here can actually access the environment. So so that's that. And then the idle stop time. So by default, after 1 hour of inactivity, so that's I've solved the last query, haven't seen any new queries for an hour, I can have it stop the warehouse for me, so that should I forget on a Friday evening to shut things down, it will automatically do that for me. At this point, I could just create the warehouse and it will go off and do that. Other interesting things in here include our health service, which will tell you exactly what's happening with the various services within that make up Actian Avalanche. So if there was something like a expected maintenance window, you'd find out about that in this environment. So typically we're looking to provide 100% availability on these services, and you'll see that's something we've achieved today. The next thing to note in here is that we have a great community that you can connect to. So if you choose that Actian community and come in here, what you'll find is that you can find some great videos that will show you how to quickly get started with Actian Avalanche. Earlier this week, we launched the Actian Academy, which is here in green. And when I come into the Actian Academy, I can see that there's a whole bunch of, there's 18 courses that I can register for. This is free. I completed one of them this morning. I registered for another. But when we come into this environment, we can sign you. You can register for all of these courses. You can take it and become an Actian Avalanche expert quite quickly. The last thing I'm going to show you, I'm going to go back to, well, actually, there's two more things. I'm sorry. Going back to my my MicroStrategy demo warehouse. Here we have a query editor that's built into the warehouse. Now, when I come in, one thing we found was that people lacked imagination in saying, oh, I've got a new warehouse now. What do I do next? So we populated the warehouse with some sample data. We chose the Department of Transportation's transportation statistics for flight departure and arrival delay information, because we kind of thought everybody's going to be able to associate with flight data. Obviously, we made this this decision on the data set before COVID and before we all stopped flying quite so much. But there's some really interesting data in here. And the other thing that we did was we came up with a set of queries that we thought could be interesting for people to run, to kind of get a feel for our implementation of the SQL language, which is standard, as well as just get a feel for using the tool. So here when we come in, this query is going to calculate the top 50 flights with the biggest average delay. It's kind of hard to read this query, so we have built into the query editor some pretty print formatting. To me, this is a much easier read of the query, so I can do that, and now I can save that pretty print version of the query. And now when I run the query, what you'll see is that the results come back here really quickly, right? So in less than about half a second, I should say, it was able to calculate from this data set, which is over 7 million rows of data, which are the flights with the largest delay, and it'll tell you whether or not it's a carrier delay or a weather delay. So maybe weather delays are going to be something that's more easily predicted, I guess, than carrier delays. And the other thing that's built into the SQL pad is the ability to do some very simple visualization. So this SQL pad is really intended for the database administrator that just loaded some new data and that wants to just check that everything went okay. We would expect that our business analysts will be using tools like MicroStrategy, but this is just something that is for quick and dirty, running some queries here. So what I'm going to do is run a horizontal bar graph. I'm going to choose to have the origin airport, and I'm going to choose to have the total arrival delay, and now it'll render this in the graph. So as I look across the graph, I can see what was a total delay, the carrier delay, the weather delay, and so on, all presented there. So just something simple to get you started. We can export the results. We can do all kinds of fun stuff within here. And I hit upon it very quickly earlier, but within the Academy, there are in fact classes on this Avalanche query editor in 5 minutes. That's literally how quickly you can come to terms with using that. And the last thing to point out, I mentioned our data integration capabilities. So when we come into our data integrations, you can create configurations like loading data from Salesforce into Avalanche. So maybe I wanted to take my contacts table from Salesforce to use in a 360 marketing campaign. I have the ability to import that and to simply just run these jobs, schedule them to run at a given time, schedule to run based upon an event happening, and I can just run that. And the intent obviously is to make it as simple as possible to bring the data into the warehouse. Other quick things on here is getting to the community, getting to our documentation, getting help, contacting Actian, figuring out what's new, all really simple and easily accessible from within this interface. So that's the 5-minute tour of Actian Avalanche. We have done everything we can to make it simple to use, and we look forward to your feedback on it. So at this point, I'm going to turn over hosting responsibility to Bill, who's going to share some insights on MicroStrategy and how it can be used in this time of market uncertainty.
Okay, thank you, Emma. Let me switch over to sharing my screen here while we get started. Yeah, so once again, my name is Bill Reedway. I look after solutions and services marketing for MicroStrategy. And just a little bit in terms of introduction to us, in case you are unfamiliar. But we also have about a 30-year pedigree. We've been through several iterations and disruptions of the analytics and business intelligence industry. Today, we serve a little over 4,000 customers in just about every industry worldwide. And today, whereas Emma talked to you a lot about in terms of how do we manage our data and keep our access to it clean and performant and secure, I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about the user experience, right? Because this is something that we have found. We did a study earlier this year called the 2020 study, the global state of analytics. And what we found based on surveying our customers and prospects and partners is that 97% of real-time decisions are currently data deprived. Now, this is what you might call a pretty severe indictment of the analytics and business intelligence industries, right? We have had, multiple evolutions and revolutions over the past 30 years, from traditional reporting over to enterprise mobility, and even moving today into things like augmented analytics and machine learning. And yet still, the overwhelming majority of decisions that are being made by organizations are what we call data deprived. And what I mean by that is not in any sense to impugn the value of intuition or experience or knowledge. However, there is a real gap. Right? There's a real gap in terms of getting the right and relevant and targeted information to the individuals that are making those everyday real-time decisions, which make the difference between success and the opposite. Right? And really, it comes down to 3 major challenges. Right? The first is a technology challenge. Right, because notwithstanding the fact that that the market for business intelligence and analytics has gotten extraordinarily diverse and powerful, we still have a challenge in terms of getting that data out to the right systems and technologies where people exist every day, right? And one of the things I'm going to talk to you about today is MicroStrategy's answer to that question, which is hyperintelligence. The second challenge that we face is a user challenge, right? The vast majority of individuals, folks that are out there in the field, Emma talked about, we've got people that are on planes, we've got people that are in storefronts, we've got people that are not really always sitting in back offices looking at analytics tools, right? These folks, there is a literacy gap, right? There is a literacy gap between the types of information that is available to them and the knowledge and background that it takes in order for them to make that useful. And the third thing that we found is just in terms of of the expertise and effort that it takes for the people inside our customers, right, inside our organizations, to build the visualizations and to build the analytics that are useful and relevant to people, right? And as a result of all these things, we still find, even after all this time, that most decisions that are out there are actually data deprived. So our answer to this is what we call hyperintelligence. All right, so the insight here, right, is that while there is a place for visualizations, while there is a place for what we might call traditional business intelligence tools. MicroStrategy has one. We're very, very proud of it, right? But we also recognize that 80% of the people inside the organization don't have access to that thing, right? Most of the people in the organization are actually in all of these applications here on the right. Okay, so we talked about, and as Emma mentioned, right, we've got this massive enterprise data environment that we have, and similar to Actian, MicroStrategy comes with more than 200 out-of-the-box data connectors to bring data from all around the organization into a single place to make it useful to people. But once again, people don't generally sit in those applications. The vast majority of people are in Salesforce, they're in Slack, they're on email, they're in Marketo, right? They're in their own enterprise applications, all right? So that's insight number one, right? Insight number two is that, we live in a world of objects, right? Everybody has certain things that are important to them when it comes to doing their job, whether it's customers or products or quotes or opportunities or suppliers, right? What the hyperintelligence card does, right, and this is our little object in the middle here, right? The hyperintelligence card takes the objects that mean the most to the individuals that are making decisions throughout the business, allows the analytics experts to define the attributes and trends and metrics that are most important to those particular objects, and makes that information available to the users where they live, in the applications and experiences that they're already a part of, without having to swivel chair and log in to an analytics application. Okay, so if you think about what this means, right? So as of today, right, you probably have dozens of applications that your users are in today, whether they're email applications or CRM or billing and finance tools and so on, right? Well, we've got a limitation there, obviously, right? Because in order to get the most value out of those experiences, we need to add data to them, right? So what did we do? We invented a whole bunch of different BI applications as an industry over the last several years, right? But the problem is those don't have the full experience either, right? Because you've got individuals that in order to get the most use out of those tools, they've got to swivel chair back and forth. What hyperintelligence actually does, right, is takes the value from the enterprise data warehouse, from all of those data sources that make up the intelligence and wisdom of the organization, and with a very, very simple, easy to understand and intuitive technology, injects those insights and those data directly into those applications, right? Making everybody in the organization faster and smarter by virtue of the fact that the data and the wisdom and the insights are now finding them, right? So I want to show you what this looks like here. So let me change applications. All right. All right, so here we have Salesforce, okay? Now this isn't a customized Salesforce. This hasn't had any development done on it, right? But what we have done, right, is we've created hyperintelligence as a browser plugin, right? So just by clicking on the Chrome plugin associated with your browser, right, we've now turned on hyperintelligence, and now what you can see is immediately, without actually even having to click, right, what hyperintelligence is actually doing is going out and scanning this page inside the browser, right, and allowing users to simply hover over the elements of the keywords that it recognizes, and bringing insights directly into the Salesforce application without having to do any customization, and without the user actually even having to search or even look for what's for what is important, right? So what we've done here, right, is we've actually made the Salesforce application smarter, right? Without having to do any coding, any development. These hyper cards, these hyper intelligence cards that we have here, they can be built in 5 to 10 minutes, right? And then by turning on the browser extension, I've now made the Salesforce application 100 times more data aware than it was before, shortening that decision period and making the individuals using this application that much more effective and that much more productive. It's not limited only to enterprise applications. It actually works with any website. Here's another example of how we've made Amazon.com smarter. You know, you may be selling your products over Amazon.com, and you can set up these same kinds of cards, these same kinds of keywords, in order to bring in information from your organization, right, from your enterprise data warehouse, and make the experience of browsing Amazon.com that much smarter and that much faster by bringing information that's relevant to you, that's keyed off of the information that is there on the page. Okay, so and you know, a lot of people ask, you know, in terms of security, right? This is not, we haven't altered Amazon.com, right? This isn't the actual page that other people can see that is now injected with your information. This is your experience of viewing Amazon.com, complete with all of the security and access controls that you would normally associate with this data. It's now available here within the simple browsing of the web page for your employees, right? Okay, and then finally, what's the #1 application that people spend most of their time in? Of course, it's email. Right, so here we also got another hyper intelligence experience where with a plugin for Microsoft Outlook, right? What the system is now doing is scanning the text of the emails, right? And once again, identifying what are the keywords, what are the objects that mean the most to me as an organization? Is it people? Is it products? Is it locations? Right, and bringing the information from the enterprise semantic graph, right? From all of the coordinated and integrated data sets that we have inside the platform. And it's making that information available without the average user having to even know what the actual MicroStrategy or Power BI or Tableau or Click interface even looks like, right? So once again, all of these hyper intelligence cards and all of these experiences, right? They were developed, they were implemented without having to do any coding, right? They can be implemented in a matter of minutes by analysts, and with just a couple of clicks, you've now made the experiences where not 5% of your organization, not 15% of your organization, but 100% of your organization, where those people are already, where they are every day. Okay, so that's a very, very brief tour of what hyperintelligence looks like. The other thing that I wanted to mention here is that if it's the kind of thing that is interesting to you, but you're not sure exactly how you would use it, we actually run design thinking workshops with all of our customers and non-customers as well to help them to understand this technology and how it might be relevant to them, right? And really it's a question of identifying, well, what are the objects that mean most to me? What are the attributes and metrics associated with those objects that are most important to my decision-making process? And what are the experiences that are most relevant, right, that are going to be most influenced and most improved by having access to the right data at the right time? Okay, I want to mention a couple of other things with respect to MicroStrategy. You know, our philosophy of intelligence everywhere really relies on 3 pillars. The first is creating modern experiences for all users in the organization, like hyperintelligence. The second pillar is our open architecture. You know, we have a massive set of APIs and SDKs that come out of the box to do everything from integrating business intelligence into your everyday workflows, customizing every single experience, whether it's on the web or on mobile devices, and making the platform decisions that are right for you and your organization. And similar to those hyper-intelligence workshops that I spoke about, in addition to all of these APIs and SDKs coming out of the box, all of our customers are actually entitled right as part of being customers. As part of their standard maintenance agreement, all of our customers are entitled to professional services hours that'll help them to walk through all these various features and opportunities to integrate and customize. Okay, and with that, I think kind of wraps up the MicroStrategy tour. So I think, Emma, I think we can turn things over to you for Q&A.
Great,
Yeah.
thanks, Bill. That was quite insightful.
Thank you very much, both. We actually received a couple of questions through the chat. For you, Emma, what makes Actian Avalanche so fast, and is there a free trial?
Oh, okay. So yes, there is a free trial, and we'll have the details of that in a moment. We'd love for you to get your hands on our technology, because what we have found is that while these conversations can be quite compelling, it's not until you get your hands on the technology using your data and your queries that you really can see how we can revolutionize your business or deliver some additional business value. And what makes us fast is that we really took a step back and said, most databases are optimized for the speed of taking data from disk and optimizing that data in RAM, so that accessing it from RAM is fast, and that you predict what is going to be needed next, and so on. And you have some very clever RAM based algorithms on what needs to get evicted when, and so on. Now, our technology is much more modern than that, and we said we want to optimize for the CPU, because modern CPU has incredible capabilities in terms of the power, the processing power that it delivers, but also it has cache on board that's into several megs of availability. So what we've done is we've optimized for CPU execution, and rather than trying to solve that challenge, which many people have solved in different ways, on balancing disk to memory, we've actually said let's go straight to the CPU. So we use things like SIMD, so single instruction multiple data, for fast query execution. We use the CPU cache as our execution memory. We have some very clever compression algorithms that we use. We're a pure columnar implementation, which for analytics makes a ton of sense. And we have designed for multiple parallelism. So when you talked earlier about MPP, it's not just parallelizing a plan that's going to be executed within a node, but across all available nodes, so that we can deliver results as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Emma. How many people can use Actian Warehouse at the same time?
Oh, okay, that's probably from a Snowflake user, because Snowflake limits to 8 users per warehouse. So we, by default, the configuration is set up for 64 concurrent users. So concurrent means that you're actually executing those queries at exactly the same time. Some of our queries will come back in milliseconds, right? We have customers that require 20 millisecond response time, so you can imagine you're getting 50 of those queries back in a second. So while the default concurrency is 64, and we'll typically see hundreds of users being able to access the database or the service, I should say, at the same time. So hundreds. We have 64 is the starting point. You can scale the environment using those AUs, the horsepower measure that I talked about earlier. So you could scale up from an 8 AU instance to a 16 AU instance and double the concurrency of the environment. So from 64 you'd go to 128.
Thank you, Emma. One question for you, Bill. How can I register for the MicroStrategy workshop?
Yes. So what we will do is we'll send out a link. You can go to microstrategy.com, and there's a landing page there that will allow you to sign up, and you'll be contacted by folks that will help walk you through the entire process. So we'll make sure that we include those in the show notes at the end here.
Thank you, Bill. There are no more questions at this point.
Okay, thanks, Alma. Bill, I think you had a slide to share.
Yep, yeah. I think just to finish up. Yeah, so we really appreciate everybody joining today. As part of, and will the details be distributed afterwards, but we'd like to offer everybody from the MicroStrategy side a free pilot of MicroStrategy on the cloud. This is a 90-day experience where you can get a chance to see how easy it is to actually set up an environment, migrate all of your data, work with our team of professional services staff in order to set you up with a hyperintelligence solution, a mobile solution, or as we say, kind of a straight data in business intelligence and analytics solution. So the details of there are available at microstrategy.com/cloud, and we look forward to hearing everybody.
Great, thanks, Bill. And on the Actian side, we're inviting you to trial Avalanche for yourself by visiting actian.com/avalanche. There you can sign up for a $500 credit. So depending upon the size of the warehouse you deploy, that could last you well into the 30 days, or you could use it all over a weekend if you create a massive warehouse. But we would love for you to start using the technology to take advantage of the Actian Academy for some free training and to provide your feedback, because that's what we'd really appreciate input on what we're getting right, areas in which we could improve, and really to take this service to the next level. So thank you again for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Bill. Thanks very much, Emma. And thank you all attendees for your time today. And please look out for the follow-up email with all the offer summary.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.